Good morning, everyone. It's Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and I thought I would do something that I've really never done before in one of these videos, and that's to show you how I'm going to put together the blocks for this particular quilt. Now, this quilt is a Studio 180 design, and it's called Doves of Hope, and as you can see, it's a very pretty looking quilt, and it's in 3 different sizes, and I'm going to make the twin size, which I think measures, and I don't know what it measures because that's on the sheet. But it does make a lap, and it does make a twin, and it does make a king. And I suppose with some finagling, you could make it into a queen too, as well. So I thought I'd show you what the component parts of this particular block are. Now you can see this does make a sizable block. And if I go back to the pattern, you can see that's what each one of these is, with some sashing in there, and they're put on point as well. I think the design's kind of nice. Now in this, it said that you could use 12 fat quarters and then some yardage. I did ask when I picked this pattern up in a store whether the 12 fat quarters were all different colors, and I was told yes, they should be. I'm not so sure about that, but I'm working with that premise. So you will see that I have quite a few colors going on in the overall block, but I'm keeping to the purples and the blues in here as well. But each block will be slightly different depending on how many pieces I have already got cut out of the different colors. So what pieces do you need? Well, they call this Doves of Hope. And the reason they call it Doves of Hope is because this block right in here is a dove, a small dove. And then this outside part is considered a large dove. Actually, I think it's this plus these pieces together make this quadrant the large dove. And you just repeat it and put in some sashing and a center block, and that finishes the entire block. So I'm going to show you how I make this. So let's just take this out of our way for a moment. And I have some pieces already pre-cut. In fact, I have all my pieces pre-cut. And if I look at my notes, they say that you need 1 3.5 inch square. Well, I'm going to be making 4 of these sub blocks, so I have 4 of them cut. But for a single dove, a small dove, you need 1 3.5 inch square. You need 1 2 inch square. Again, I have them cut for 4 blocks. And then you need a 2.5, it says 2 2.5 inch squares. Let's move these over here. That's a 2.5 inch square, and a 2.5 inch square, 2 of them in the background color. And this is my background. Now, I only have 1 of each of these because I've already gone ahead and done the next step in prepping this little sub block, and that is to change these 2 pieces, the 2 2.5 inch squares, and change those into a half square triangle. And the small dove block needs 4 of these. So I have a bunch made over here, but I'm going to show you how to make a half square triangle from these 2 pieces. So you're probably familiar with how to make a half square triangle. In fact, there are many ways to make a half square triangle. For this particular pattern, we're taking one of our colored pieces, and we're going to put on top of it, with the right sides together, the background piece. Then we're going to take a pencil and a ruler, and we're just going to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner. Simple as that. So now we're going to take this to our sewing machine, and I'll show you what's happening next. So let me switch the camera to the sewing machine. And there we are. And I'll just go over here and sit down at the machine, and hopefully you can have a good look at this at this angle. Now I have a starter piece, a jump start, a leader, whatever you want to call the little piece of material. That's just to keep the points of this from going down inside the machine when I start to sew it. I have already attached my open-toed F foot, and I use this particular foot because there's a little red marking here in the center that shows me where the center part is of the needle. Now I've set up my machine to move my needle over to the right so that I'm going to have a 1/4 inch allowance on this side of the line. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into the machine. I'm going to line up this point with that red arrow on my F foot, which is the center mark, and I'm just going to sew a line of stitches 1/4 inch from that line I just drew with my pencil down on one side, turn it around, and do it again down the other side. So I basically have 2 lines of stitching 1/4 inch away from that center line. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So as I said, I have my needle set up to do 1/4 inch from the center line, and we're just going to sew. Cut my thread. Oops, didn't cut it completely there. Take off my leader and put that in again. Just get it started. And I'm going to go back here, and I've turned this around. So now I've got a stitch line along here, and I have my drawn line in the center, and I'm just going to do it again. I'm going to put this in and just do another 1/4 inch seam or 1/4 inch line of stitching to the right of that center line. And cut my thread. Okay, now of course, I'm doing this for demo purposes, but if I was working on this quilt, I'd be doing it assembly line method, and that is where I would chain stitch all of these in a row and then separate them and do what I'm going to do next. But just one thing, and I'm an idiot. I just realized something. For some reason, I went crooked on that stitch line, the first one that I did. Not a problem. I can fix that. So let's get this started. I'm just going to stitch it again because this is going to be cut apart. So this is not going to give me any grief. Not really sure how that happened. But these things do happen. Okay, now I should have a straight one, and I do. And that's fine. So let's go over to the cutting mat, and I'll show you the next step of this. So I'll switch the camera. And there we are. And I know this is difficult to see. I have an overhead light here that I don't know what to do about that. Okay, I'm getting out my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to put my ruler right along that center line that we drew with the pencil and just cut this in half. Now, in the instructions, they want us to square these 2 half square triangles up so that they are 2 inches. I believe it's 2 inches. Yes, 2 inches. Now, I have this tricky little ruler right here. Turn it this way so you can see it better. Trying to get the glare off. It is called the Strip Tube Junior. I really like this ruler. This is great for half square triangles for squaring them up. There are many ways you can square up a half square triangle, but I like this the best. So I said that these have to measure 2 inches square. So let's just move that one off to the side. My rotary cutter in hand. And I'm going to find on this ruler my 2 inch mark line. And that's this one with the heavy, put it in here so you can see it. So up here, that heavy black line is 2 inch. So what I do is I line that up along my stitched line, and you'll notice there's fabric on either side, and that's what I want. Take my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to clip off those 2 pieces. So I'm going to do that again. This is a great ruler. This one will do up to 6 inch squares, and then there's a larger one you can get that'll go beyond 6 inch half square triangles. But right now we're just dealing with 2 inch. So I have it lined up on my stitch line and just taking off these slivers from the side. Let's get those out of our way. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take them over to my pressing board or pressing mat, and I'm just going to set the seams and then press them back, and I will have 2-inch squares, which is what I need for this. I'll just have to clip off the dog ears. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll be back in a minute to show you where all these things go together. Okay, so now I'm going to assemble one of the 4 small Dove sub blocks. So for that, I need the 3.5-inch square. I need 4 half square triangles. These are 2 inches apiece. And actually, I should build this so it's the right way for you to see how this goes. So those 2 along the top, 1 2-inch square at that end, and then the other 2 half square triangles go simply down like that. So that will give me my small Dove sub. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to transfer it over to a little table that I usually use when I have pieces laid out so I can put them together right, and we'll come back and I will show you how to sew these together. Okay, so I'm back at the sewing machine and I'm going to sew my pieces together, and I have them off camera here to the side of me. So I'm going to take 2 of those half square triangles that were at the top of the block. I'm laying them right sides together, making sure I have the angles going in the right direction. And, oops, I just forgot one thing. I've got to change my foot. So this is an opportunity for me to show you the foot that I used for the half square triangles is this. That's what we call the F foot. And now what I'm going to use is my quarter seam foot. Looks like that. It's got the little piece on the edge as your guide. And I make sure that my machine is set at a 1/4 inch. The needle's been moved over to that spot. And I'm just going to put in my leader, get that going. And now put these together. Now when you put little squares together like this, I have found that oftentimes they look a little wonky until you get them pressed in. So those 2 are on the top. I'm going to do a little chain sewing here. I'm going to take the 2 that are off to the side and right sides together and make sure I have the angles in the proper direction. And do the same thing, just sew along the edge. So I've got these 2 pieces sewn together. And these 2. And I'll just lay them out here and show you how this all fits together. So there we go. Probably I should turn the whole thing around so you get a better view of it, what it looks like from your point of view. Here it is. Okay, so I'm going to press the seams on these 2 pieces, and then I'm going to sew this piece to this piece to this piece, and then when those are all sewn together, I will simply sew this piece on top. And I'm pressing the seams for this one towards the left, and when I get this one on here, it'll be towards the right, so I'll have some interlocking seams. Okay, so I'm going to do that off camera because my iron is not very well positioned for video. So I'll be back. So now we're going to move on to making these into the large Dove squares. And the part you need for the large Dove square is the small Dove square, and you can see that's all together now. You need 2 4-inch squares in your pattern paper, 1 3.5-inch square, 2 2 by 5-inch rectangles, and 2 4-inch squares of background fabric. And we'll put this all together. But before we do that, we need to take these two 4-inch pattern squares with these two 4-inch background squares, and we need to make half square triangles from these. So we're just going to do the same thing as we did last time. We're going to lay the background fabric right sides together on top of each of these 4-inch squares. And then we're going to take a pencil and a ruler, and we're just going to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner, just like we did with the small dove square. We're going to change these into half square triangles by simply sewing a 1/4 inch line on either side of the drawn line. So I will do that, and then I'll square them up, and I'm going to use the triangular ruler that I used before, the Strip Tube Junior, and this time these need to be squared up at 4 inches. So I will just find the 4-inch line on here. I'll line it up with one of the seam lines and cut, and then I'll press them open. So I'll do that, and then I'll come back. So I have my half square triangles all trimmed up, and now I'm going to show you how I press them. And I think I mentioned before, I think I gave you the wrong measurement on these ones. These work out to be 3.5 inch half square triangles. So I just have them laid here, and I'm just setting my seam, and then I'm pressing to the dark side. So I'm just opening this up. Now be careful, because this is cut on the bias, so these can be stretchy and you don't want to stretch them out of shape. So you just give them a good press as opposed to ironing them. That's a hard word to say. And then once these are all pressed open, I'm just going to clip off these little dog-eared corners, and we'll be back for the next stage. Okay, so this is what the pieces will look like once I get them sewn together, and I just want to go over all the components here. So we start with that small dove square that we've already made, and then we have two 2 by 5 inch rectangles, and they go off to the top and the side. Then there's another 2-inch square, and I'm using one that's the same color as the little square that's in the small dove. And then around the outside of that, we have our 4 half square triangles that we made from 2 patterned 4-inch squares and 2 background squares. And then these were trimmed down to 3.5 inches each, and then a 3.5-inch square up here at the corner. So all of these will get sewn together. And the order of sewing them is going to be, I'm going to sew these 2 pieces together, these 2 pieces together, these 2 pieces together, then these together, and then this one to this one, this one to this one, this one to this one. It'll make sense when I show you what it looks like once it's sewn. So I'll be back. So here's my large dove square, and you can see what it looks like when it's all sewn together. Now I just need to make 3 more of these, and then I can start assembling the block itself. Okay, so now I've got the 4 large dove sub squares done, and now we're going to put this all together to create our whole block. And to do that, we need 4 2-inch by 9.5-inch strips, and we need 1 2-inch square for the center. And so essentially what we're going to do is we're simply going to sew this to this, 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 and then we'll have 3 sections, and then we'll just sew the rows together. So I'll come back once I have that done. So there, I've got all these squares sewn together now, and here is the finished block. I have not squared this up yet, and I'm not going to square it up until I have all the blocks done. Then I'll make sure I have them all exactly the right size. But you can see it goes together quite nicely. It is not difficult. A fair number of pieces, but you do get a very big block out of it. Now again, this is called, the quilt is called Doves of Hope. It's by Studio 180 Design. It does tell you to use the Tucker trimmer tool, but I didn't use it. I have it, but I like the triangle tool that I was showing you earlier for doing the half square triangles a little better than the one that they recommend here. But both will work, and if you happen to have one over the other, I would use it. Um, this is by Deb Tucker, so if you want to get this particular pattern, then just do a search, or your local quilt store, that's where I got it, may have it in stock. So again, it's called Dove of Hope. So this was part one, and in a few weeks' time, I'll come back with part two, where I'll show you how to start putting this together and then adding the borders and things like that to this particular quilt. And we do have to deal with these little triangles in here. So that's going to be something new as well. Okay, so stay tuned for further episodes of The Idiot Quilter. Bye for now.